Attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Classroom Management in Your Behavior. I am here representing the New Hampshire Partners for Healthy Schools with Janet Breaux from the Laconia School District, Eugene Benoit from the U.S. EPA Region 1, and Sandy Rhee, Organization Guru. Today's webinar, again, is brought to you by the Partners for Healthy Schools. And to get you started and prepared for how to participate in today's presentation, first, for those of you that have been through these presentations before, you're aware of how to open and close the panel. But for those of you that are new, to open and close the panel, you'll press the little orange arrow, and that will close the box. That way you can see the entire presentation. You won't be impeded. Next, during the presentation, we're going to answer the questions at the very end, but we encourage you throughout to submit your questions in the text box. So if you have a question for any of the presenters today, please do not hesitate to throw your question in there. We'll compile them, and at the end of the presentation, we will ask those questions of the presenter. And then lastly is the raise your hand feature. So let's give that a little practice right now. How many people have attended a webinar through the New Hampshire Partners for Healthy Schools prior to today? So go ahead and take a moment, press that little hand feature. You see the little hand in your box there? And we have about half of you have. Excellent. No. Now I am going to pass the presentation over to Sandy Rhee. Sandy, it's all yours.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Sandy Rhee. I'm the organization guru. I am one of the members of the New Hampshire Partners for Healthy Schools. We are a group of individuals and business folks who all have a common thread, and our goal is to make schools healthier and to raise awareness of the correlation between the building environment or the classroom and the health of its occupants. That is something we all have in common. The nice thing is we meet once a month. We bring all sorts of different areas of expertise together and work collaboratively to forward the goal of having healthy schools. The partners you can see are listed on your screen right now, and I do want to say that it is an open meeting. We meet the fourth Tuesday of every month from 9 to 11 a.m. at the local government center in Concord, and anyone is invited to attend. So if you are hearing about this and you realize that you have a skill set or something to contribute, or you need more information, please feel free to come and join one of our meetings, because they are open to whoever would like to come. Now, moving on, we have a year-long webinar series that is currently in progress. Today is the third of the recordings. And our goal is to provide the knowledge and skills to better manage the classroom environment and to empower staff to become strong advocates for the sound management of the indoor environment in which they will be working. You can see there that there is a link to the February recording, there is a link to the March recording, and these are also archived at our website, which is newhampshirehealthyschoolenvironments.org. If you go onto that website, it is on the very front page, and you can see all of the different webinars that have been done in the past. And again, today is the third of this particular series.
So Sandy, if someone has not participated yet, they can catch up.
Absolutely. You can go back and listen to either of the first two or both if you would like. And if you miss one in the future, you can pick up on it in the future once it's been recorded as well.
Excellent. Thank you.
Now, to give a little tease, we are doing the third one today, but just to let you know that the fourth one will be Objective 4. It will be held on June the 4th, I believe at the same time, 10:30 to 11:30. And during that particular one, we will be introducing the students, you, to federal and local regulations that impact the school environment and begin using the Tools for Schools kits that you should have in your districts. So we have a great group with us today. We're going to start off with Janet Breaux, who works with the Laconia School District, and she's going to tell us a little bit about how her school district in particular has been utilizing Tools for Schools and some of the resources that are available through the New Hampshire Partners for Healthy Schools. So I'm going to turn it over to Janet now.
Good morning. My name is Janet Bro, and I work as the administrative assistant at Laconia School District. In 2007, we decided to form a group of staff members, students, administrators, and our business administrator, and form a green team. The original intent was to recycle bottles and conserve paper, basically to recycle. What turned out as a recycle effort, what started as a recycle effort turned into a money-saving effort for the district, and we saved thousands of dollars conserving energy. We've gone green on all of our notices. We send all of our information to parents in a weekly folder once a week. We do most of our payroll checks are paperless. So that's one of the things we did. We tried to get our teachers involved in organizing their classrooms, and we came up with a little gimmick, Extreme Classroom Makeover, and we offered to make over classrooms for teachers if they were willing to help. We would go in and reorganize their classrooms and make them more efficient for them. So I'm going to share with you a few of our classrooms. Okay, there we go. So this is one of the classrooms we started with, and this is a before. This is the vents right here, the heater vents, and as you can see, they're all covered up. We went in, took everything out, six 30-gallon garbage containers full of stuff, and we reorganized this with the help of the teacher, bought storage containers, and as you can see now, it's all clear. The air can flow, the fresh air can flow in and out instead of just being stale in the classroom. This was a teacher's desk area, all the papers. You can understand she was overwhelmed, didn't quite know how to get things in order. So we went in there, took everything out, put up a bulletin board for her, organized everything for her, and much easier for her to work.
And what we know also is that when you have a busy, congested room like that, it's also very stressful for a teacher. It does contribute to being overwhelmed. It's not healthy from a stress management standpoint.
Right, as well as for students. Most of our students come from chaotic class homes, and they like a little bit of organization, and so if we can give that to them in the school, they can maybe concentrate a little more.
Now, you may not have been measuring for this, but did you see a decreased incidence in reports of asthma for students because of the less paper in the classroom?
We didn't measure it, but I would guess that there was less illness, and I mean, it just makes sense that there's less dirt and dust flying around, so it's easier to breathe, easier to concentrate. So yeah, I'm sure that if we did some studies, we could find that it was effective.
Yeah, the before and afters are amazing. It doesn't even look like the same classroom.
I know, it didn't.
On both of them.
It really didn't. And now this is the students' cubbies. They hang their coats here and put their books in here. This is a classroom, a working classroom after school. So this is how it looks when they're not there, and when they're there, their coats are hung up there and their books are in there. So this wasn't staged or anything. This is just how it is after we cleaned it out. So
are students required to take their stuff home every day?
Yes.
Fantastic.
Yes. Now this is this might be familiar to quite a few teachers. You have a game area. This was organized to a little bit, but not organized enough for if a student wanted to play a game, where is it? I can't see it. So all we did is pull everything out, and we put the like with like, put all the games together, and as you can see, it's just much more organized, much easier to go in and I want to play sorry, well, there it is, instead of I'm sorry, can't find it.
It reminds me of what my mother used to say, put it back the way you found it.
That's right, that's right. And now I'm going to turn it over to Sandy.
I'm actually going to go back one screen just for a moment because I want to show you that on this particular screen, Janet said that they put like with like and organized everything. In addition to being easier to find, it's also much easier to take care of the materials that you have when they are organized like this and stacked properly and flatly. If you'll notice down here, the way it was before, when things are off kilter like this, that's when your boxes get ripped. That's when they get destroyed and bent up and things start falling into the cracks and falling apart. And so there are a lot of benefits to this in addition to just the straightforward, I can find it more easily. And in the long run, it works out much better. The Laconia School District did a lot of work. They did all of this before they found me. I'm a professional organizer, and I work mostly in people's homes, but I'm also a former teacher, and I work with school teachers to get their classrooms organized in addition to working with people in their homes. And I've found that it's one of the things that isn't taught in college. There is no class on how do you organize a classroom for effectiveness. They talk about managing student behavior and things like that, but not about the classroom space itself. And we're working on changing that a little bit and introducing some curriculum into some of the college courses that will help for teachers that need this experience. But the Laconia District did this all on their own, and then they realized that they had some teachers that they wanted to give more help to, but they didn't have the time resources to continue to do it in the manner that they were doing it. And that's how they found me. They actually called a friend of mine who is also an organizer, and they mentioned that they wanted help working with kids and teachers, and she said, oh no, not for me, not my area of expertise. You should give Sandy a call. As a former teacher, I have a lot of experience with this, and so it's much easier for me to come in and help and know what needs to work in what way, and that is a benefit to everyone. So I've started working with the Laconia School District on kind of a contract basis where when they have a teacher who realizes that they're overwhelmed and wants some help, I go in and I give that teacher some assistance. And then the nice thing is once I work with one teacher, that teacher is able to explain what was done and then help other teachers in the building. And we're finding that it is not necessarily a peer pressure situation, but more of a, there's help available if you just ask for it. You just have to get over the intimidation or whatever it is that is keeping you from asking for the help that you need.
It's almost contagious.
That is the idea. Contagious in a good way. And contagious is a much better word than the peer pressure that I was thinking of. So we're going to go with that one. All right. When you are going to clear clutter from your classroom, there are lots of things that you want to keep in mind. An organized classroom has a home for everything. It is more conducive to learning, as we said earlier, because there's lots less distraction that is there for kids that have a hard time focusing to begin with. And things are easier to find so that when a teacher has an idea, oh, this particular thing would help me to demonstrate this topic really well, they can then find what it is that they want to use and bring it into a lesson almost immediately. All of this leads to higher test scores and lower absentee rates, and it also leads to more control over all aspects of the environment. Finally, it's easier and faster to clean. Now, for the school administrators, we may want to talk about improved indoor air quality and such as that, but when you talk to your teachers, let's say you have a teacher who is disorganized and you want to have an improvement in that classroom, the idea is to give that teacher a benefit that means something to them. Improved indoor air quality is a noble idea, but it isn't what's going to be motivating to the teachers. However, more conducive to learning, higher test scores, more control over the aspects of the environment, those are the arguments that are going to motivate the teachers to do what they need to do to have an organized classroom. When you have reduced distractions, another huge side benefit is for ADD students, and we're seeing more and more students diagnosed with ADD. We're seeing more and more teachers diagnosed with ADD. And so, again, that's another benefit that is actually very, very meaningful to teachers and will get them oftentimes to change the behavior that you need for them to change.
Fantastic.
All right, so what needs to be done? We mentioned already gather and store like things together. When you have a teacher's classroom, the idea is to have zones in that classroom such that all of the math things are together, all of the science things are together, all of the art, all of the supplies that you want students to have access to, such as highlighters or crayons or extra sheets of paper if they've run out, should be together. That like things together is one of the key elements to organizing anything. Another part of that that isn't listed on this screen is that you want things to be stored near where they're used. If you have something that needs to go home with students every day, you want it to be stored near where their coats are going to be or near where the doorway is. If you have things that need to be used when you're at a bulletin board, let's say you need push pins or you need things in order to create an interactive bulletin board, then they should be stored near the bulletin board. That's the idea. That way things are easy to get to when you need them. Utilizing plastic bins and labels. Plastic bins can be clear so that you can see what's in them, or you can use opaque when you don't want the distraction there. But if you label everything, even if it's an opaque bin, you can know what's in it. Now, the reason I say plastic bins, the whole idea of the New Hampshire Partners for Healthy Schools and all of this is the ultimate goal of improved indoor air quality. When you use plastic bins, the things that are stored in them are going to be dust-free, and when there is dust on the bins themselves, they can very easily be wiped down, even if you need to use a wet rag. Paper boxes, things of that nature, don't wipe down quite as easily, and so plastic is kind of the ideal. If you have enough closed storage space in your room, behind cabinet doors or in drawers, that's even better. But if it needs to stay out, plastic bins are really the way to go. Pare down excess as well as materials that will not be used again. I apologize, but I'm going to flip back a couple of screens to the demonstration that Janet had of this particular classroom. If you look at the before versus the after, you'll notice that there seems to be a significant decrease in the amount of stuff in the after picture. That's because a lot of what is stored, whether it be in our homes, whether it be in our classrooms, whether it be in our offices, whether it be in our janitorial supply cabinets, wherever it is that you're talking about, we tend to keep a lot of things that are excess, that are either no longer needed, that are broken down, that are out of date, or are simply too many copies of one thing that are no longer needed. The idea is to pare down everything that you don't need. When you have a brand new teacher that comes into a building for the first time, they're often inheriting a classroom that was left by another teacher. If the teacher prior leaves a bunch of things, one of the biggest hurdles for a new teacher is to come into a classroom and be able to know what out of all of this do I need to keep and what can go. As school district staff, it's important for you to let your teachers know that they have control in their classrooms. And if they have things that are left from a former teacher, maybe someone who's been teaching for 30 or 40 years and just leaves a classroom full of stuff. I know we all have seen this in buildings. The idea is to let that new teacher know that that stuff doesn't have to be kept. It doesn't all have to go in the trash, that's for sure. And a lot of people will not want to get rid of things because they don't want things to just simply go in the trash. Let them know that they can be recycled if it's excess paper or excess plastic, and know that they can pass along things that they don't necessarily want, but that someone else in the building may want. So, I have always worked in school districts where there was a place designated, maybe informally, maybe formally, where if you had something that you no longer wanted but was useful to someone else, you could put your things in that one place and most often it was in the teacher's lounge. And other people would know that if they see something there, it's free for the taking. And that way things get used by the people that actually need to use them. Then, if nobody wants it, then you look at other options such as recycling, or, if worse comes to worse, actually putting it in the trash. All right, moving back forward to the slide we were on, paring down excess is one of the key parts of organization. Now, this is also the part that takes the longest, simply because you often have a lot to go through, and this is the step that keeps teachers and office people and homeowners from starting the process in the first place, is because they realize how long it's going to take. The Laconia School District combated that by realizing that it was going to take a long time, so they created a team to come in and help. That's something that I do. I go in and I help the teachers, and I make what could be an overwhelming, very long, very involved job come down with 2 or more people doing it to something that is much more reasonable. The other thing to keep in mind is that any amount of time that is spent on the front end will pay you back 100-fold on the back end, with an ease of finding things, an ease of working through your classroom, the fewer distractions, all those things that we've already said.
Now, who would you suggest be part of these teams that come in and assist teachers with the whole process of starting to pare down that excess? You mentioned yourself. What about other people? Who else do you suggest? Do you suggest janitorial, custodial staff to be part of that team as well?
That's a really good question, and I like that, because not every district is going to want to actually pay money to hire someone like me to do it. They may have financial, not difficulties, but restraints that don't allow that. If you have a teacher that is working to do it, I don't necessarily recommend the janitorial staff, other than asking them for assistance with, what can I do with these materials once I'm getting rid of them? Where should I recycle them? Where should I put them? Where is it easiest for them to be disposed of properly? What I would like to see is to have other teachers in the building, maybe someone who has a classroom that is more of an ideal of what you're working towards, or someone who is a bit more objective. Let's say, for example, you've got a 2nd grade teacher that needs to clean out their classroom. Another good person to come in and assist would be, say, a 5th grade teacher that has one of those classrooms that is a model of what you're looking for. The reason for the difference between 2nd and 5th is that a 5th grade teacher is not going to be quite so sentimental about the 2nd grade things, because it's not something that they work with on a day-to-day basis. Thank you.
That's okay. That's what I'm here for.
Couldn't think of the word. That's one of the benefits that I have. When I go into someone's classroom, I am completely objective. None of the things in that classroom hold any memories for me. None of them are, what if we could do this? None of them bring forth those emotions. So if you can find someone to help you out who can be objective like that, it's very beneficial, because then they can ask the questions, do you really need this now? Or is it something that if you need in the future, you can easily replace? We live in a fantastic time where information can be found quickly. So if you're looking at something and you're thinking, oh, I might need this someday, that's a valid thought to a point. The point being that, A, it's taking up space now that you could use as open space or for something else, and B, how easily would it be to get that again in the future if it turns out you really do indeed need it? And the answer to that often is very easily and very quickly in the age of the internet. We can find just about anything. The other thing would be to keep just 1 copy of something instead of 30. I realize that that means that if you use it again in the future, you'll have to make additional copies for your students. However, if you don't use it, you've then freed up that space for the time being between the now and the then.
I know in our house, a way that's helped out is my wife watches an episode of Hoarders, and all of a sudden our house is sparkling clean. So That's another utensil you can use as well. I know that you got to find what works for you, but that certainly has worked. I've never seen my house so clean as after an episode of that is aired on TV. So
I actually hear that a lot, and that's pretty much fear-based. The fear is, if I keep everything, that's where I'm going to end up. And I can guarantee you that there's at least one classroom in just about every school building in the country where if you take a teacher to it and say, you know, if you don't start tossing things now and paring down now, this is what you're going to end up looking like. And it can be a scary thing to be in those classrooms. I'm pretty sure everyone knows and has experienced at least once what I'm talking about.
And all kidding aside, there are oftentimes, for people who do have those hoarding tendencies, there often are mental health issues that are involved in that too. So we don't want to minimize what happens when someone has those tendencies, but just sometimes it can be a useful tool. It can remind you to what not to do. So.
That is absolutely correct. And I do want to distinguish very quickly the difference between a pack rat and a hoarder. A hoarder actually is a mental disability, and it is someone who does not have the ability to realize the difference between things that are useful and necessary and things that are not. And so therefore everything becomes important, whereas a pack rat just likes to keep all of those things just in case. Most of the times what we see in classrooms are pack rats, not actual hoarding situations.
Very good definition. We appreciate that.
All right, moving forward. Some things to keep in mind. First and foremost, you do not want to store food in classrooms. I think that the reasons for this are very, very obvious. They can attract mice and other types of rodents. They can attract ants and other bugs and critters, and so it's not a good idea to store food in classrooms. If you do absolutely have to store food, make sure it's stored properly in sealed, airtight containers. I do know that some teachers will keep bottles of water and things of that nature in a classroom. So make sure that you're doing what you need to do, and if your district has a food policy, make sure you're following it. By the same token, minimize fabrics, and the ones that are in the classroom need to be washed on a very regular basis. Again, a lot of districts have policies about fabrics in the classroom, and a lot of these are coming from new fire codes that have been put into place in the last several years that require fabrics in a classroom, whether they be furniture, whether they be pillows, whether they be curtain, stuffed animals, etc. They have to be fire retardant or they cannot stay. If you've ever had a fire marshal come into your school, they will actually pick up a couch and remove it at that particular moment if it is not meeting fire code. But back to what we're talking about, if you minimize the fabrics and wash those that are used on a very regular basis, you can eliminate a lot of the incidents of mold spores, of
pet dander that sometimes comes in off of kids that have pets at home.
Thank you. He keeps coming to my rescue. I love it. And then no animals in the classrooms as well. Animals are another thing that more and more districts are saying, okay, you got to leave the animals at home. They cannot be in the classrooms at all. They are an allergen to a lot of kids, and they just take a lot of maintenance and a lot of cleaning up afterwards. So those are just some basic things that you want to keep in mind.
And as Eugene could probably point out later, is that we're trying to reduce the asthmagen, so the things that trigger asthma for students. And when we take those fabrics, those unnecessary fabrics out of the classroom, we take the animals and their dander and their waste and their shavings that they're in, we remove all of that stuff, we've reduced the interaction that some kids who have those sensitivities will have to deal with. And that's the goal.
Right. In fact, a lot of this material is also sort of like homes for pests. So all those fabrics, even keeping animals in the classroom, the food that you use to feed those animals is like a lure for other pests to come in.
Okay.
Like mice and and insects and so on. So it's a good idea that you look at all of these things to minimize the number of potential allergens and asthmagens that can enter the classroom.
Yeah, when I look at a guinea pig, it doesn't look too far removed from a rat or a mouse anyway, so
Yeah.
I can understand why they like each other's food.
Very true. All right. 80% of all paperwork can be recycled. This is a very true statement. And this, again, can be true in a classroom or in an office. So those of you who are calling in from school districts but are not actually in a classroom, you want to take a look at your office as well. 80%. I think that actually might be a little bit low, to be perfectly honest. The idea in this day and age is to utilize online and electronic documents. We've been talking for years about how we're going to become a paperless society, but what we've really become is a dual society. People utilize the online and electronic documents and think, oh, I can go paper-free, but yet they keep the paperwork as well just in case the online blows up or there's a crash or the hard drive goes bad, whatever the case may be. The idea is get the paperwork out of the classrooms, out of the offices. It's not necessary to be there. Use the online and electronic documents, but then back them up. Make sure that you're using a backup service, whether it be a hard drive that is separate from your actual computer, whether it be an online service, whatever it should be, you should be backing everything up. The paperwork that students are done with at the end of the school day, at the end of the school week, at the end of the month, whatever rate of taking it home that works for you, all of those papers should be going home to the students' homes rather than staying in the classroom. Old papers that are out of date. Many of us have lessons that we used year after year after year, but yet we make improvements to them year after year and then keep all of the old versions as well. You really only need the latest, best version of anything. If you go through a classroom, again, the idea is to get rid of everything that isn't necessary to be used in that classroom, which gives you so much more area, it gives you a much calmer frame of mind, and it gives you a much calmer atmosphere to be working in. Back to the indoor air quality, you want to make sure that all ventilation areas are unblocked. When you are organizing a classroom or a teacher is organizing their classroom, we've seen where sometimes a bookshelf will be put up against a wall and blocking an air return or blocking a vent. That interferes with the way that classroom breathes, and so those sorts of things need to be paid attention to. If you walk into a room and you cannot see any air intakes or any air ventilators or supplies or returns at all, chances are they're blocked behind something, and if they're blocked, they're not working properly. For the business managers and the people in the school district at the upper levels, that costs you money because it puts a great deal of wear and tear on a system that now has to work harder to blow around whatever is put in front of it or on top of it. And so financially, it's not a good idea. Environmentally, it's not a good idea for the reasons I've already said. And the idea is to keep those things clear. Again, going back to the picture that Janet showed a little while ago with all of the papers stacked up on top of the ventilator, imagine the amount of dust that collects on the top of all those papers. Well, as soon as the air gets moved, that dust is either blown up and into the room or sucked into the ventilator and then into the air system of the school building itself. Again, not a good idea. So once all your paperwork is put online and in online electronic document form, great. The stuff that has to stay, put them in the plastic bins that can be wiped down and dusted off, and make sure that all of those areas are completely unblocked.
And just a reminder that old lesson plans are not like baseball cards. They don't gain value the longer you hold on to them. So it is a good idea that after 5, 6, or 7 years, kind of like your tax documents, you're allowed to get rid of them. Go ahead and toss them out if you know you're not going to use them again. And that way it saves the space in your classroom, because some teachers will spend their entire career in one school. And if you can get in that habit, it can certainly help with that.
Yeah, and I
And
think
Eugene
another
wants to add
a
something.
positive thing is that if you have an organized classroom, then it's just so much easier to clean. You're able to get that dust, and and that's one thing that if it's a cluttered classroom, it's really difficult to clean. So I think a great aspect of having an organized classroom and just keeping the things you need is that the custodial staff can really do their job. The teachers can do whatever dusting they need to, but I think just controlling dust, that's a really important thing in the classroom for kids who have asthma.
Absolutely.
Agreed, 100%. To finalize, for those of you that are not classroom teachers, I encourage you to show this link, which you will get in an email after this presentation is over. Encourage your teachers to listen to it. Let them hear, let them see what it is that we're talking about today, because it may entirely be something that they just simply haven't thought of. I know I taught for years, and I'm a professional organizer now, but it wasn't until I became a professional organizer that I thought back on my teaching career and thought, you know, I did a lot of things that I didn't need to do that weren't organized, even though I was an organized person, simply because I just didn't think about them. It never occurred to me. Now, if you're going to pass along any one thing, I would pass this along, and this goes for anyone in your school building, whether you're in an office, a classroom, a janitorial supply cabinet, a facilities management warehouse, wherever it is you are in the district. The guiding principles of being organized are to assign everything a home. That way you can put it back when you're done with it, and you can find it when you need it. Put like with like, and put things near where they're used. Please be aware that like with like is subjective. What means like with like to one person may be different for someone else. So let each person decide what works for them, and in areas that are shared, come up with a group consensus that makes sense to everyone. Put things back when you're finished. Reduce and recycle. Constantly ask yourself, what can I get rid of? What doesn't need to be here? What doesn't need to be ordered in the first place because I already have enough of it to begin with? And then finally, reuse and repurpose. Can someone else use this, or does it have another use? That way things aren't necessarily going in the trash if they still have a usable life, and you can feel good about passing them on rather than bad about filling up a landfill with them. Now, the final thing that I'm going to say about being organized is that it does require habit changes for those folks that are not naturally organized. If you get organized once, it is then something that has to be maintained. You have to constantly ask yourself, what can I get rid of? Where else can I put this? I have to put it away when I'm done with it, and things like that. So when you're working with your teachers in the buildings, please understand that it is a process, not just a once and for all and I'm done situation.
Excellent. I think that was very informative, what we've received from both you and Janet so far, and now Eugene gets to hit cleanup. So it is all yours, Eugene.
Okay, well, thank you. Actually, I feel very inspired by everything that I've heard this morning. I hope everyone online is also inspired to maybe look at their work desk and clean that up, and I'm going to tackle my basement this year. So I think what you're learning here in this webinar is really more than just organizing your classroom. It's like organizing your life. And so I've been taking a lot of mental notes about that. And I think also everything that we've heard this morning is totally in line with the Tools for Schools approach. In fact, I think if you just organize your classroom and and it's able to be cleaned, I think you're more than halfway there to just actually doing Tools for Schools. So just by way of introduction, my name is Eugene Benoit with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. I'm the Regional Tools for Schools Coordinator. I'm also on the Regional Asthma Team. I'm also the Tribal Air Coordinator for the New England Tribes. So just about everything I do deals with indoor air quality. And let me just, you've heard a lot about the health aspects about why is indoor air quality important, but I think for some people it's like, oh, okay, who cares about health? Well, of course we do, but if the message that makes sense to you is money, then this is the message right here that you really have to look at. We did an economic analysis looking at repairs done at an elementary school, And we found that if you spend $370 per year over 22 years, that's a total of $8,140. Then in terms of preventive maintenance, then you can save $1.5 million in repairs. So, I mean, this is a powerful message. So the whole thing about, delayed maintenance and so on, well, you're going to pay for that after a few years. It's better to just stay, to maintain things year after year, make sure that there's a budget for that for every school and every school district and so on. And I think just, organizing your classroom is also just part of that kind of maintenance of just making sure that every teacher in the school has an organized classroom. It has benefits not only for education, but also for the environment. And we do want to protect the most sensitive populations in the school of, kids who have asthma and other pre-existing conditions.
I want to jump in for just 1 second
Sure.
and say that an organized classroom actually does save you money in this respect, specifically because when you have an organized classroom, if there is something wrong and maintenance comes to work on it, they have access to what they need to access. They don't have to climb over mounds of paper and piles of things to get access to electronic circuits, to the vents that need to be cleaned, to the lights, to the ceiling. They have access to everything they need to access. In addition to that, if you have a water leak or a ceiling tile problem where there's something wrong with the roof or there's something that needs to be noticed, in an organized classroom, you can actually see when that happens. I've been in classrooms where they could have a water leak in that classroom and you wouldn't know it until the stuff on the front and piled on top of it actually is soaked all the way through. And by that time, you've taken what might have been a very easy, simple, inexpensive fix and turned it into something huge that now needs to be fixed. And it was so much worse simply because you couldn't see it to realize that it was wrong in the first place.
Right. And another thing that comes to mind is the whole issue of like safety and even fire safety. I mean, I just can imagine a cluttered classroom is really going to burn quickly, with all
certainly.
that stuff. So, I mean, let's try to keep things down to a minimum of what's like flammable in a school. I mean, I think that's a pretty good message. And the more stuff you have in the classroom, the more pests, they have shelter and so on. And I think it's just in terms of just the psychology of being in a classroom. If kids walk into a cluttered classroom, I mean, what does that say about, the school and can they focus on what the classroom message is, or the lesson plan for the day when they see that all around there's like towering piles of paper and so on. So anyway, in terms of the federal policy about Tools for Schools. It's a national program. There's no federal law that says a school has to implement Tools for Schools. But here in New Hampshire, we do have a fairly new law. I think it's a couple years old now. And that what it's requiring every school, public school in New Hampshire to have is a copy of the Tools for Schools kit. And then, of course, it says it encourages public schools to implement the program. Well, I hope you don't just say, oh, we're just going to have the kit, not do anything with it. Well, no, I think there's a lot of good information in the kit. There's training programs, and I think that, we're very focused on, the indoor environment and cleanliness and so on, and I think that's also a really high priority for schools as well. And so we encourage you to learn more about it, and we actually do have a webinar coming up next month on June 4th. At this same time, and we're going to dig deep into the Tools for Schools kit and show you how to implement this program. So my little talk today is just kind of whetting your appetite to learn more about it. So let me just run through a few very quick things. I mean, basically, I see implementing Tools for Schools as kind of 6 kind of areas. One of them is organize, and this is like developing a team in your school, and I'll talk more about what the team is next time. It's basically, the principal, a school nurse, a parent, a teacher, a custodial staff who will meet regularly to discuss issues and try to find solutions. So communicate is basically doing the checklists that are in the kit. The assess part is collecting those checklists and figuring out, well, how we're going to do the walkthrough investigation. Planning is kind of, so which classroom should we focus on and so on. Act is taking the information we've learned from the checklist as well as from the walkthrough investigation and figuring out what steps do we need to take to improve indoor air quality. Then we go through an evaluation of all that. Gee, what did we learn? What are the things we need to focus on for next year? How can we get some funding to maybe get a new roof, or maybe to fix some unit ventilators, or hire someone to help organize a classroom? Whatever decisions are made to that regard. And then organize, the process starts all over again. So we want it to be very common sense, very low cost, and that's been the whole approach with the Tools for Schools program. And so really the overall goal of implementing Tools for Schools is really a healthier indoor environment. We know that healthy kids learn more, there's higher test scores. Also, I think we're not only concerned about just the students, but also the health of the teachers. You know, they're there most of the time. We also want, you know, the schools in New Hampshire to be really the beacons for health and high levels of educational experience. And I think this is all part of what we want to achieve, and I know that's exactly your goals as well. And we'll get into the kit next time, so I hope you can join the seminar in June, and we will basically take apart the kit and show you everything that's inside. And here are a few resources.
All right, so right before we do the resources, I just want to bring up a couple of things. First of all, at the conclusion of this presentation, within the next day or two, you'll get a link to this presentation, so you'll actually have it come to you, and you can pass it along to your coworkers, to your administrative leaders within your school district. You can pass it along to anyone, let them watch it, and see if any of these ideas make sense. We believe they do make sense, but they certainly can. You can see that they have potential money-saving and health-saving qualities to them. And then also you'll be receiving an evaluation, and how we make these presentations better is based upon the input that you provide us. And a little pat on the back we don't mind as well. So if you thought it was great, please tell us too. But that's your opportunity to indeed give us some feedback. Now, as Sandy, after Sandy does the whole resources component, what we're going to do is we'll take questions at that time. So she will tell you a little bit about the resources here, and then we will move on to questions and answers.
All right, so if you have any questions, feel free to type them on in right now. The resources that you see here include the New Hampshire Partners for Healthy Schools. There is a phone number that will lead to one particular member, and then the website as well as an email address that can be used to gather more information. The IAQ website is the indoor air quality website for indoor air quality, obviously. Organization Guru, that's me, my phone number, my email, my website. If you have questions about organizing in particular, or if you work for a school district that would like to have someone come in and do a short presentation for your teaching staff during a staff development, or need help with a particular teacher, feel free to reach out to me. And then Eugene Benoit from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, his phone number and email address are there as well. And again, if you have additional questions that you would like to ask that you don't want to ask right now during a taped seminar, you can send those directly. On the screen prints that you received in email, there was an additional IAQ informational hotline that was listed. You'll notice that it's gone off of that screen because that hotline no longer exists. So we apologize for having different information in print versus what you're seeing here on the screen.
Can I just say budget cuts?
Yeah. Welcome to sequestration, right?
Yeah. Yes.
All right, so
right now the only question was something I was able to answer directly to the individual. Do we have any others? Okay, we do. We do have one of those classrooms, and where the teacher seems very reluctant to purge. Administration needs help. Where do we start? Or where do they start?
they want to start by finding out with that particular teacher what is the key reason that is going to make it worth their while. Do they have an unhealthy classroom? Is it something where students in their classroom who are easily distracted are having problems? Is it something where they just simply have so much stuff that it's costing them time? The idea would be to find out that one reason or a couple of reasons that are really going to resonate with that teacher in particular. And for each teacher, it's a little bit different, and you might want to ask peers, you might want to ask the people who are close to that teacher to find out what really is going to get to them to make them go, okay, this is what I need to do for the betterment of, again, whatever the reason is that's important to them.
So gathering data would be helpful. So in other words, does this teacher's students have more visits to the nurses' room? Do you have
Yes.
more incidences? Are test scores lower? That type of stuff can be beneficial to the administration if they're trying to sell the point to the teacher.
Exactly. Are there
Going
more?
to the teacher and just saying, well, your kids could do worse if they have this type of environment isn't necessarily going to help the teacher. But if a teacher sees that her students are performing 5 and 10% lower in test scores than the other teachers in that grade, it may be beneficial and may open his or her eyes.
Yes. And if that teacher complains a lot about not having enough time to do this or not having enough time to do that, or I would love to do this but I just simply can't find it, those are the sorts of things that if you make it personal for the teacher, you may still have to do some pushing. It's not going to necessarily be like a light switch that you can go over and just flip on, but through some talking and aiming discussion specifically to what's important to them, you can make a difference.
Can I ask, I mean, have you ever heard of a school like launching a campaign, like we're going to clean up our school, especially if the school has maybe 1 or 2 classrooms that are cluttered and, you know, you don't want to do any finger pointing, but just as a general thing, you know, and that there will be help available. Maybe there will be some teachers who have clean classrooms who can serve as mentors. I mean, is that something that you think might be?
We saw that happened at the Raymond School District. They do it actually at the end of the year. They pull in a dumpster, a 30-yard dumpster.
Oh wow!
And they invite all the teachers to clean out their classrooms. And I don't know if that was the reason behind it was to encourage one particular teacher, but they fill that thing up every single year. So that could be an effective tool so that you don't point at any one teacher and you don't make them feel.
It becomes a part of the environment and it becomes a part of the expectation level of a school, because each school, even within a district, tends to have its own personality, and that personality often comes through what is done on a regular basis and where the leadership is pointing to. The other thing is make sure to involve the administrators as well. If there's an administrator's office that is just as bad, show that that administrator is going to do the same thing, and that can be helpful as well. And pointing to particular school districts, the Laconia district knew that they needed to do something, and they opened it up as a contest and took applications and had applications for teachers to do it. And what was neat was that the first teachers went ahead and did it, and then the benefits of that were then felt throughout the schools where those classrooms were. And I can tell you that the same thing has happened with me. I've worked with a couple of specific teachers, and then other teachers in that same building have approached and said, okay, what you did for that teacher, can you do that for me too?
Yeah. Well, I feel New Hampshire's like very fortunate. I mean, we have a model school like in Laconia, and I know there's other school districts that are doing the same thing. We have our own, organizational guru here in New Hampshire, and I'm sure that your position is probably like in other states as well.
There are the equivalents to me all over the country.
All over the country. And then we have the New Hampshire Partners for Healthy Schools. I mean, it's not like every state in the country has like such an organized group of people who are dedicated to this. I mean, there are folks who are dedicated to it, like in other New England states. But I think here in New Hampshire, I mean, I feel that New Hampshire schools are in good hands. There's a very supportive environment here. And then there's a state law that's, requiring them to actually do the right thing. So I really see a lot of great things here.
And we have the benefit of geographically being a small state, so it's easy to get around the entire state compared to Texas, where you can fit about 15 New Hampshires in there. So,
right. And even just the support to do this webinar as well. So,
yes.
So thanks to you guys.
Well, I don't see any more questions, so we're going to wrap up today's webinar, and we want to thank each of you for taking the time out of your day to be part of this webinar. I'm Tim Parsons, Health and Safety Advisor from Local Government Center, and I wish you all a very wonderful day. Take care, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.